I think so.
So, yes, welcome to Somerset's Early Years pre-recorded online training presentation of the 7 key features of effective learning. My name is Nikki Difford. I'm a senior lead officer within Somerset's Early Years team, and I'm co-tutoring with this training with Alison, Jeffery, Early Years lead and primary advisor.
Hi everybody, nice to see you, albeit not in person today. I hope you enjoy the training.
If you've attended any of our other training focusing on the revised early years, you will notice key messages being reinforced, i.e. team working, keep what works for you. We can't stress that enough. You keep what works for you and just maybe develop other areas that you're having concerns about, and reflecting on practice. So that is our main messages throughout all of our trainings. So just to brief you on what we're looking at this training. So the aim of the online training is to look at the revised Development Matters 2020 and the 7 key features which is implemented into Development Matters, which gives guidance to managers, practitioners to support. So within the training, we're going to look at the changes of the EYFS 2021, which you need to implement from September. We're going to individually explore each of the 7 features of effective practice. Look at how the 7 key features can be used to support training and ongoing professional development within your settings. Now, all your training that you put on for your staff will be a little bit different. And we will look at training as we go through the slides. So reflecting on working practices, so looking at questions to ask yourself and your team, and again we've got some examples of those after each area of the 7 features, and supporting documentation. And again, we've put the link on the bottom of this slide that links us to our SSE pages, and there's a lot of documentation on there. There's a lot of templates, there's a lot of examples, there's a statutory frameworks on there, so it's worth you go and have a look and see what you like. So statutory framework. So the EYFS, so it's pages 8 to 10, sets out an educational programme which must involve activities and experiences for children as set out under each area of learning. Now the 7 areas of learning titles have stayed the same. So you've got the 3 prime areas which underpin everything in early years. So within this is your communication, language, physical development, personal, social and emotional development. We then have got the 4 specific areas which help children to strengthen and apply those prime areas. So they consist of literacy, mathematics, understanding the world and expressive arts and designs. Now the content of the areas of learning have changed. They are more in depth and they explain exactly what is required within each area of learning. So our advice is to look at and go through with staff, and this is what you will use as your basis of your curriculum or to support what you already have in place. The Development Matters is a support tool. It is guidance to help you devise your curriculum and any other paperwork that you want to meet from that, your assessment, observations, etc. Now, within the Development Matters, pages 9 to 11, it details the characteristics of effective teaching and learning with examples. And again, you need to reinforce with practitioners that these weave through all those 7 areas of learning, which support children becoming more powerful learners and thinkers. And the quote that we have there that says practitioners must consider the individual needs, interests and the development of each child in their care, and must use this information to plan a challenging and enjoyable experience for each child in all areas of learning and development. So again, this is pulling everything together. But I can only reinforce that you just need to look at those educational programmes and read through with your staff. So we're going to look at the early learning goals. Now these have changed, and on the slide you'll notice the changes have been highlighted in yellow. Now you have communication and language, again prime area, and this has the focus on extending vocabulary and underpins all the 7 areas of learning, really the development of children's spoken language. So then we have personal, social and emotional development, and again all aspects of this has changed. And the focus is supporting children's understanding of their own feelings and how to manage their behaviour. And again, we are going to look at self-regulation in more depth, later in the session. Also in the early autumn, we've put on a 2-hour training around this aspect, just like we've done for mathematics and the communication language. And again, we will hopefully record these like we've done for this one. So then we have physical development. And again, all aspects have changed. They've separated gross and fine motor. So again, it's supporting children to develop to support future achievements. And we need to remember that, you know, you cannot expect a child to hold a pencil if they haven't got those gross motor skills to develop that. So again, we need to think about that when you're developing your curriculum or you're developing activities to support children's development. Mathematics, again, there's greater focus on a deep understanding of numbers 1 to 10. Shape, space and measure have been removed as an aspect, but it is still within the educational programme content. And within that educational programme content, it says it is important that the curriculum involves rich opportunities for children to learn, develop their spatial reasoning skills across all areas of mathematics, including shape, space and measure. So it's still there, but actually we need to focus on numbers and numerical patterns to support that future learning of children. So understanding the world, again, technology has been removed because, again, there's an awareness that as children grow up with ICT and they use it within their daily lives, settings will continue to use ICT as a enhance learning. But again, they're focusing on the past and present, people and culture. So again, remember, this has to be relevant to the child's ages and stages. So for a 2-year-old, you need to think about what their past means to them. So you need to think about that again when you're developing those activities, you're planning. And expressive art and design, this has more clarity. It focuses on children's development through this area of learning. Again, it's just a few tweaks to the wording on that one. The points to remember with these early learning goals are they are a level of development. They should be expected to be attained by the end of the early years foundation stage. So again, that's when they're going into year 1. So it's that end when they're 5. It's not when they're 3 and 4 within a nursery environment. The the early learning goals are not to be used as a curriculum or in any way to limit the wide variety of rich experiences that are crucial to child development. So, for example, reading frequently with them, playing with their friends, etc. It's not to replace that. And the early learning goals should support teachers, practitioners to make holistic best fit for judgment about a child's development and their readiness for year 1. So again, when you're having that conversation about the educational programme, yes, it's worth talking about this, but again, this is not your end goal anymore. Your end goal is your curriculum, your progression, your skill set, whatever you're going to call that. If you're in a school, yes, that is different. And again, you need to link to these, but again, they're not your curriculum. So development matters. So hopefully you've all had time to read through. Gillian Grenier says it's a 90-minute read. Now, the aim of this session is to look at the 7 key features, and we are going to, take some time to first look at the changes, because you need to be aware that Development Matters now is a guidance. It offers a top-level view of how children develop and learn. It guides, but does not replace professional judgment. Professional judgment has always been part of the assessment process and supporting children's learning. But now we need to ensure staff understand children's development and how they learn. This is one of the steps in preparing for September. So it's about supporting staff to ensure that they have the confidence in their professional judgment. Again, the second quote, Development Matters sets out the pathways of children's development in broad stages and ages. We know that the actual learning of children is not so neat and orderly. The main purpose of these pathways is to help assess each child's level of development. Accurate assessment helps practitioners to make informed decisions about what child needs to learn and be able to do next. And again, within those 7 key features, we will be looking at curriculum, we will be looking at assessment. But again, we have to stress there, you keep what works for you. We're not asking you to throw away everything and do something different. That's not the point of this session. This session is really to hopefully support your staff, and then hopefully with the reflective questions is look at what you're offering. And yes, and think, yeah, that works for us. No, it doesn't. And the last point there, it's not a tick list for generating lots of data. You know, again, that's what Development Matters 2012 turned into. We just use those statements and tick them off if a child could do them. And again, people had different ideas. If they had to see it 3 times, they wouldn't take parents' learning parents' observations into that. They had to see it themselves. So again, it's maybe rethinking how you look at your assessment process. And again, practitioners using their professional knowledge to help children make progress without having to record lots of next steps. Settings can help children to make progress without generating unnecessary paperwork. And again, that's maybe something you need to think about. So Development Matters, just a very recap with the changes. So there are 7 key features of effective learning. And the features summarise some of the important professional knowledge that practitioners need. Go into look in depth throughout the session. So that's the whole point of view, attending the session, or who attended the sessions, and then who are going to recap with this online training. So characteristics of effective teaching and learning, you know, and again, it's to support practitioners in reflecting rates at which children are developing and supporting adjusting practices. So again, this is how children learn. And what's great about the characteristics of effective teaching and learning tables, they give examples of how to support. They give ideas, activities. And then you have tables which summarise some of the pathways of children's development. You know, and again, these tables exist as a backdrop. They provide guidance to help us develop an ambitious curriculum, which is appropriate for the children attending your setting. So again, the guidance sets out basic outline of how we can support children's learning and development in the early years. So this is a starting point for you. It's not the full story. And the development tables are split into 2 columns. So first column is headed under the age, and the ages are on the slide. Then you have a second column headed examples of how to support this. So this is where this, you know, you get very good support for your staff training, to support staff individually with specific issues. Maybe they need support around interactions, ideas, how to set up an area. And then within that, you have observation checklists in the prime areas of learning. So again, this will link with child's development and professional judgment. And the quote, this guidance is intended to support children as they grow up happy, healthy and curious and ready for the next stage of their education. And actually, it's good if you can think that a bit longer. So it's the next stage of their learning journey. And as you know, as practitioners, you're coming along to this training tonight. We're all on that learning journey. So again, it's just to make them, again, want to learn. So the EYFS, it continues to promote that very, you know, that saying which every child deserves the best possible start in life and the support that enables them to fulfil their potential, which also links to the Ofsted inspection handbook. So when they come to visit you, they're going to say, what is it like for the child in this setting? So those 2 link, and you need to think about that when you're developing your curriculum, developing your assessment. Now, the overarching principles are still the same. They've been tweaked. So you have 4 guiding principles, which should shape your practice in early years settings. So every child is a unique child. That hasn't changed. Children learn to be strong and independent through positive relationships. That has not changed. The ones that have changed are children learn and develop well in enabling environments with teaching and support from adults. So that pedagogy approach. And the importance of learning and development. You know, children develop and learn at different rates. So again, they're linking into that characteristics of effective teaching and learning. So then we put the 7 key features around the outside because they all link into that. You know, the best for every child links into every, you know, the 4 overarching principles. So does high quality care. The curriculum, you know, links into that unique child. It links into enabling environments because your curriculum should take care of that. And then you've got also learning and development. So again, all of those interlink, and then they interlink to that, those overarching principles. So again, it's just about making staff aware of how they link and actually how they can support those children. It's just a different way of thinking. And over to Alison.
Thanks, Nikki. So Nikki's given a really good overview, not only of the changes, but of the 7 key features of effective learning as well. So What I want to do is now start with the first key feature, and that is the best for every child. And we're just going to explore that over the next few slides and hopefully give you some food for thought to take away with you to talk with your teams about whether you think that you are already meeting this aspect, which you could very well be, or whether there are any gaps that you would like to fill. Okay, so all children deserve to have an equal chance of success. Hopefully that is nothing new. Hopefully that is something that you well recognise in your practice and provision already. And certainly from our team's perspective, we see that day in, day out when we're visiting you. It goes back to the unique child principle, and every child is a competent learner from birth who can be resilient, capable, confident and self-assured with support which links to the points below. Okay, so just really thinking about making sure that every child in your setting is considered and has access to every aspect of your provision. The next part, high quality early education is good for all children, but it is especially important for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. So much data out there now, which shows outcomes for children at a later stage in life being really detrimentally effective if they haven't had access to high quality early education or a highly effective home learning environment. Especially important for those, obviously, those children from disadvantaged backgrounds. So those starting points are really important. Children, as we know, start in settings at a range of ages. But if you are there to know what they already know and where those gaps are so that we can make up lost time if necessary, then we are giving the best that we can for those children at the earliest of stages. Going on to the third point then, so when they start school, children from a disadvantaged background are on average 4 months behind their peers. We do need to do more to narrow that gap. And unfortunately, that only gets worse with time. So when you get to the end of Key Stage 2, that gap is wider still. And then when you get to the end of GCSEs, that gap is wider. And then it has a detrimental effect on those later adults getting jobs and having those later life chances. So really, the time to act is now while children are with us at the earliest of ages. Children who've lived through difficult experiences can begin to grow stronger. We know a lot more about child development in terms of brain development and neurological development now than we ever used to. It's really, really good to look at that research if you ever have a chance, because it really does reinforce all of the messages that we're giving. But that early education, that quality experience that they have, can reverse some of those difficult experiences that children may have had at a very early age. And there's data out there to suggest that by the age of 7, it's more difficult to do that. So really, again, the time is now to act and to put those supportive relationships into place to make sure that child, you're aware of their needs and what their outcomes potentially could be, and act on it quickly. High quality early education and care is inclusive. We absolutely need to ensure that's not a new message that is being delivered here, but it's a chance to really kind of reflect on your current practice to see whether there are any gaps that need filling. Children with special educational needs and disability, SEND, should be identified quickly. We already know that. And hopefully the reforms really are going to reinforce that message, because what we're doing with the reforms is giving practitioners the time back, in theory, to be able to spend more time with the children, to be able to identify gaps early on so that we can act promptly and give them any extra help that they need so they can progress well in their learning. Okay. So we felt that this was a really good slide actually to include, and this cycle of disadvantage that you can see on the left-hand side actually comes from Australia, but it's, absolutely depicts what we're talking about here. So, there is a cycle of disadvantage, unless we get in there and break that cycle of disadvantage, this can be self-perpetuating. And obviously, as we know, the gaps get wider as children get older. So things like poor transition from home to school, lack of motivation, skills to learn, all of those things that you can see in that cyclical and with the arrows, it does reduce the capacity to provide quality home environment, things like that. And that cycle of disadvantage really means that child, their later life chances are detrimentally effective. And as you can see there, we've already talked about the 4-month gap when children from disadvantaged backgrounds arrive at school. And a child who is not at the expected standard in language at the age of 5 is 11 times less likely to achieve the expected level in maths at the age of 11. So you can see that really, if we get it right in the early years, we can really make a change for the better. And it's really pertinent that bit at the bottom. Inequality can damage children's health, development and learning from an early age, but we can do something about it. The Education Endowment Foundation has some brilliant stuff on the website. Please do take a look at that if you haven't had a chance to already. But the gap that they talk about is that the 4 months that we're talking about here doubles to 9.5 months at the end of primary school, and then more than doubles again to 19.3 months by the end of secondary school. It really is damning when you look at the data around it. Okay. So how do we go about knowing everything there is to know about that child so that we can act quickly when we need to, but really help every child to get the best out of their time with us and improve their later life chances? So we do need to know, value and understand the children that you are working with. That includes the family, and we mustn't make negative assumptions. We're not saying that anybody does, but it's just good to reinforce that with any new members of staff or less experienced members of staff. So, you know, casting aspersions on a family when they come on in, you know, is really, is not going to help in terms of what we do for that child. And I think it's really important to state that just because a child is from a disadvantaged background does not mean that they're not having positive experiences at home. Many children are, but obviously we know the data tells us that that can be a big factor. So we just need to be aware and talk to the family so that we can get that bigger picture. When we know, value and understand the child, the family and all of those adults that, you know, have a good involvement with that child, we know that that is the time to offer the right support. And this can be to access your high quality provision. So before anything else, having a high quality provision means that that child is having access to really great first-hand life experiences, really great quality of education. It's especially important for children living in poverty, like we've said. And in a 2015 report, it commented that at age 11, high quality preschool is especially important for boys, pupils with SEND, and those from disadvantaged backgrounds. High quality preschool enhance the maths outcomes for disadvantaged pupils and for those of low qualified parents. So we know that high quality early years education makes a difference. We need to offer a rich and broad curriculum that meets the needs of all the children in our settings. And it's really lovely because we're now talking in terms of children experiencing fascination and wonder in the early years foundation stage. Colleagues like Alistair Bryce-Clegg, like Julian Grenier, Julie Fisher, lots of those people who are out there that they're blogging and vlogging and all those things that you can access online. You know, the words that they're using is really getting to the heart of what we hopefully, you know, got into early years for, and that's to really give those children some really lovely experiences, the awe and fascination in the world. Let's help them to see that and offer irresistible learning experiences across all 7 areas of learning. That will absolutely make a difference. The next part is about positive and nurturing relationships. And we already know how valuable the key person approach can be to offer that really warm and loving relationship right from the word go. But I think also it's important to note that, you know, if a child or a family and that key person, there isn't a, you know, an initial kind of gelling of relationship, it's okay to identify that and to make a change. That is acting on early identification of need, isn't it? It's really kind of talking to the family and making sure you're meeting their needs. So don't ever be afraid to say, I don't think this is working. Let's try something different. So that key person approach is still absolutely important. It's extending those wider relationships, making sure that other adults and obviously the parents and carers are all involved with knowing about that child and what you're doing to support them. And that can be help children become resilient as well. When they see adults modelling good quality relationships, they will learn that that is what the kind of relationships they need to have as well. Promoting equality and eliminating discrimination when setting the curriculum. So we now have an opportunity to really think about our own professional knowledge, and we all know what children need to know. We already do it day in, day out, but we're reliant on these tick lists. This is an opportunity now for us to kind of really say what we want those key ingredients for those children's learning to be. And so therefore the equality and eliminating that discrimination should come naturally as part of that, because those children are already in your cohorts, you know them, you know your families, and so therefore it should come more naturally. But you do need to consider the learning environment and resources, the minute-by-minute interactions with children, the language and the behaviour that is used by the adults, and setting partnerships with parents and how you communicate and role model those behaviours to those parents as well. So it's just worth taking a moment to stand back and observe and consider that that is all in place at your setting. And have an awareness of unconscious bias. And I don't think anybody would mind me saying we're quite women heavy in early years. There's a lot of women in the industry, less men. And you know, I'm not saying why that is or whether that's the right or wrong thing, but we need to be aware, especially on behalf of the boys, that we're not putting that on unconscious bias. We would never mean to. That's why we say it's unconscious. But again, it's just good to stand back. It's to reflect on your resources, the environment, making sure that it really is inclusive for all. And there are things there that all children will want to get involved with. Okay, a narrow curriculum can have a disproportionately negative effect on the most disadvantaged children. So we need to get that right. And this is our opportunity to really think about that and get it right for the children in our care. Okay, so high quality early education and care is inclusive. We've talked a lot about that already. And through that, we need to make sure that we're making reasonable adjustments for disabled children and for children with special educational needs and disabilities. The aim of the adjustments is, as far as possible, to remove any disadvantage faced by those disabled children. So again, it's just good to stand back. I'm sure you're all doing this already, but it's just worth having a consideration for if there are any gaps, these are the times to fill them. As part of that, the observing and assessing of children, all children identifying those who do not seem to be progressing well. So again, these reforms are giving us an opportunity now with reducing the workload for those children who are already accessing our curriculum well. We know that they are making progress because they are accessing that curriculum. Those children who aren't, that is the time when the observations and the assessments should be you know, important in terms of identifying small steps and what we can do to support. So we'll talk again in a little while about the curriculum and assessment points of view, but just bear it in your mind for now that if the child is progressing well, there is, you know, you can do some assessment, and assessment is important, but not to the degree that we've been doing it traditionally over the last few years. But for those children with disabilities and special educational needs, it is important that that assessment is in place. Communication with parents. Practitioners must discuss such concerns. We know that with children and with children's parents and agree how to work together. And that should be done at the earliest opportunity to avoid any kind of confusion, to avoid anxiety. Really involve the family in their very first conversations about, oh, I wonder whether you are witnessing this at home. You know, really have those holistic conversations so you can start to work together from the onset. Individual support and specific resources. So it's not just offering the same to everyone. Okay, in the past, maybe inclusivity has been misinterpreted in giving all children the same. Actually, we know that all children are different, so they're going to need different things. It doesn't mean that you're being unfair to any other child. You're just meeting each child's needs. And when you do that, there is no unfairness about it. So you may have to offer the activity in a different way. And we'll, again, later on talk about scaffolding up rather than differentiating down. So making sure that all children can access everything, but they might need more support to do it. And it's how you do that that's important to consider within your teams. Accessing relevant services to support the children, also the child and the family, is obviously very important. We have the early help assessment that is still very much there and used for the purpose of having that initial assessment, that holistic assessment with anybody working with that child, and obviously especially the family as well, so that together you can agree what that assessment looks like and what that support might need to be. And then targeted interventions for those children who really need it when they've reached the stage that they need targeted work from outside professionals that might be needed, and all children for a specific reason, i.e. a child who doesn't like messy play, needs to be introduced to things slowly, might need a speech and language therapist. You know, there's a range of things across the spectrum of special educational needs. And there's an interesting quote here. It is possible that around 13% of the children in the UK may have an undiagnosed need. These issues can affect all children, but those from disadvantaged backgrounds and certain ethnicities are more likely to be affected. And that's from the Preparing for Literacy, Improving Communication Language in the Early Years from the Education Endowment Foundation. So again, it's just really important that we pick up on these things really, really quickly. Okay. So let's conclude a little bit then on that first key feature. So the unique child and the right of every child to high quality early education, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, is key. These are some of the reflection points for you to take away. Really advise that you kind of talk to your teams about this. If you are a childminder working on your own, get together with local childminders, contact your early years communities leads if you don't know those people already, because having these conversations together is just really a positive experience because you learn from others really well. So how is it that you get to know each child and their family? You know, what are the processes in place for that, and how do you make time for that? How would a family arriving at your setting know that all children are welcomed? So, you know, it's that chemistry, isn't it? It's walking in the door, meeting you for the first time. You know, what is it that you do to make that family feel welcome? It's really important. How do you identify children who may be struggling to take play in the learning and the play that you have on offer? You know, what the processes again in place, the key person approach, all of that, you know, and the assessment that you use. Are your staff secure in understanding child development? If they're not, act now. There are online courses out there to cover child development. I wouldn't stress that more. You know, all of this curriculum planning that you're going to be doing is all based on child development. So if there are gaps in your staff's knowledge, plug them now. Are you secure in staff knowing the processes for gaining additional support for a child? You know, do they know who the SENCO is? Is the SENCO doing regular things with them? Are you using your area SENCOs? You know, just to make sure that you've got those processes for those children who may need support in place. And have you reviewed your practice and your resources to check you are promoting equality and opposing racism and gender stereotyping? Really, really pertinent questions to ask. Please do take them away and spend some time thinking about it. Okay, I'm going to hand back over to Nikki now.
Thank you. So the second key feature that we're going to look at is high quality care. Now, we know it's a joy to work with children. We also know it can be challenging and physically and emotionally exhausting at the end of the day. So therefore, we need to support our staff. Now, Alison mentioned about reducing paperwork, and this is one of the reasons for the changes within the EYFS. But we also, there was a report by the Early Years Alliance called Mind Matters. And we know that within that, out of their about 3,000 respondents, 52% of those respondents say they do not believe their work and non-work life are balanced. And 2/3 felt they received inadequate support. So again, through this, with those reflective questions, that's where we're looking at that support as well. So you need to think about that again as a thread going through this online training. And Alison mentioned earlier, you know, you need to think about how we're doing this and why we're doing it, but you need to think about actually your staff and how you can do that. So this theme is about practitioners and how they can support the children in providing that high quality care. So you've got the child's experience. It must always be central to thinking of the practitioners. And we know that you do that. It's been, you know, that's our reason why we're here, isn't it? You link into the best for every child. So again, Alison mentioned you were talking about curriculum and planning later on in the session, but again, that curriculum needs to be based around those children. So again, you need to think about all of those children you've got in, and you need to think about the ages and that you plan for, and then take it down to individual needs. Babies and toddlers and young children thrive when they are loved and well cared for. All these things that you're aware of. You know, you have a key person approach because of Bowlby's attachment theory. And again, it's what works for you. Now, we know, again, in the past year, everything has had to change because when we first started the first lockdown, you all went into bubbles. So maybe your key person approach had to have dramatic changes. And again, some of you we know that thought actually they work for us, we're going to keep that. And again, that's what we're saying throughout this. Keep what works for you. You will need to explain this to Ofsted because they're going to talk to you and they're going to talk to all your staff. But again, think about that. High quality care is consistent. Every practitioner needs to enjoy spending time with young children. And again, maybe it's that question of how do you know this? Do you have that assumption that every person that comes to you for interview wants to work with children? I can be really honest with you. I know that's not always the case. They're sent for interviews for a variety of reasons. So again, maybe this is something you ask at interview, or maybe it's something when you do that observation, hopefully, which can come back now, where you can have people into the setting to see how they interact. and spend time with the children, and also spend time with the staff, because actually, you know, your staff need to interact with them as well. Effective practitioners are responsive to children and babies. They notice when a baby looks towards them, gurgles, and responds with pleasure. We know interactions are important, and they're important for a very young age, and that won't be necessarily verbal. Like we just said, it could be a smile, you know, all those sorts of things. You know, when you see a child in a pram, don't you, or in a pushchair, you usually wave at them and smile at them. You know, you can't help but do that. And again, within the educational framework, the communication and language, it mentions back and forth interactions. And again, that mainly will be verbal, but again, it's just responding to that child. So again, maybe you do some peer-to-peer observations, or maybe the manager and leaders do observations and looking at staff, how staff interact. And Ofsted will be looking at that when they come to visit you. So in the new inspection handbook, I think it's paragraphs 80 onwards, it explains what Ofsted are going to look for. So again, use that. Use that when you're doing training. Have that there. Get staff to look at it and say, look, this is what they're going to be looking at. And one of them is interaction from staff and children. So again, have a think about that. So practitioners understand that toddlers are learning to be independent, so that they will sometimes get frustrated. You know, it's about your staff understanding emotions. You know, and again, Alison mentioned it previously, and there's another one we're going to keep mentioning, linking to child development. You know, it's having those strategies to support, and we will look at that a bit later on when we're doing self-regulation. But again, it's about being aware that it does link to their age, and it will link to communication and language, because if a child of 2 may not have the language to explain why he's frustrated. So that's why they hit out. So again, it's getting them to understand, you know, that the toddlers will do that for different reasons. Practitioners know that starting school and all other transitions in the early years are big steps for small children. And again, we have to be very mindful in this time that we've been in, because a lot of those children would have either been at home, or they would have been maybe just starting back with you. So their world is just becoming a little bit wider, sorry. So it's linking to the point above, to emotions. It's about being aware of those transitions, and that transitions can cause a variety of emotions, and they won't be the same. One child might really be enthused about going to school, they're ready to move on, where another one just is not ready to accept that yet. You know, so again, it's having those strategies to support. So how can you support this? A lot of this you will be doing already. You know, we've talked about consistency. All children in the setting, no matter of their age, need consistent, warm and responsive care from the adults they spend time with. But this also links to environment. You know, changes are good, and we're not saying don't change your environment. What we are saying is don't change it week on week on week, because those poor children are not going to have time to settle into that environment, to get used to it, to become independent learners within that environment. So you need to think about that. When you think, oh, I might just change this, think about, when did you last change it? And what is the purpose of change? We've talked about the key person approach. Alison talked it in the best start for the child, you know, but again, it does ensure that each child can be known and cared for by a special person. It allows parents to feel confident as they know who to talk to if they have concerns or want to share information. But again, just recapping what Alison said, you know, there is nothing wrong in actually saying, actually, that key person and that child isn't working. You know, we've noticed that, you know, instead of little Johnny going to Anne, she seems to go to Steph all the time. So actually, then you need to reflect on that, and you need to think, actually, because I've been in settings and I've spoken to people and it's, oh no, they'll be fine. Actually, it doesn't work like that. And you're not supporting the child. You're also not supporting that key person either, or that member of staff. So again, another thing to think about. Time for staff to reflect on children's emotions. And again, I know time is really hard when you're working in a setting, because there is always something else to do. But again, it's important that the staff have time and space to enable practitioners to think about the children they are with that day. You know, we need to think about, children have different impact on practitioners and may result in some staff members spending time with other children and ignoring some. And we all need to think about that. To be honest, most of you know me, I've been out there a long time, I've worked in a lot of settings, and I know from a fact that probably the quieter children probably are not the ones that come to me very often, because actually I am very loud, I am very, you know, let's do this, let's do that, you know. So again, we need to think about that. And again, it's about being honest. So at those staff meetings, it's saying to staff, look, actually, let's just be honest. Who works with us? Who do we think actually we spend more time with? Do we spend more time with certain children? And again, staff support. So supervisions, just a general catch up, and again, just that support. If they have somebody say to a member of staff, look, I noticed that, Freddie was very angry yesterday, and I noticed that you worked really hard with him. How did you feel at the end of the day? Because they will come to you and say, actually, I felt really good. I felt I did really, good work with Freddie, and he came out of that and he was fine. Or actually, it might be, actually, I felt shattered. I didn't realise how hard it was going to be, but I wanted to support him. So again, recognising that gives a boost to your staff. And everybody needs a bit of a boost, especially in these times. So training, as I mentioned, child development, again, linking that to the emotions, any training which support activities within a specific age range, and again, I'm going to say about emotion coaching. There's a lot of that going out there. So again, if you want more about that, then go and talk to your early years community leads, and they will put you in direct contact with that. Understanding transitions, we talked about it briefly before. So again, how do you support that? How do you support them? And some of you might have a lot of children that are going to, 10, 11 schools. So how are you going to support that? And again, you need to think about the impact on child's emotions. And then supporting those transitions. So strategies, what do you have in place? We've probably stopped home visits. That might come into place in September for you. Arrangements for children to visit the school, arrangements for practitioners to visit the children at the setting, using technology. I know a lot of you have got really good videos online. You could do Zoom settings, and there's nothing really stopping you doing a Zoom setting with a group of children and that teacher of that school. Because actually, again, if they can't get into the school, and again, working with those parents to support the child through the process of transition in the best way possible. You will also need to support the parents to ensure that both are prepared for school. And again, the quote there is from UNICEF, and there is no widely agreed definition of school readiness. UNICEF suggests that the 3 dimensions of school readiness are, so children's readiness for school, so you are preparing the children, you're making them aware, and again, videos of the school, even just photos of where the school is and whatever. School readiness for the child, so you've had a conversation with that teacher, ensuring they understand the children's needs, and that might be sometimes the parents. So again, it's having that. And again, the question there is the school ready for the child? Because you know your children. So again, it's talking to them. And families and readiness for school. So again, preparing the parent. You might have a parent that turns up like 15 minutes late every day at your setting. And actually, not good, but actually it doesn't impact greatly on you. But actually, that won't be greatly received at the school. So again, it's just talking to that parent saying, actually, can you meet us 5 minutes earlier and then 5 minutes earlier, and then you'll get there. So again, it's about that partnership working. And again, we come to our reflective point. So the focus of this key feature is on the emotional needs and development of the child in particular. So the child's needs for consistent, warm relationships, the key person role, and transitions in school readiness. So again, we've put some questions up there. Again, they are not exhaustive questions. You will have some of your own, and please add them in. But again, both myself and Alison have talked about, have you reviewed your key person approach? How secure are you in staff knowing their children? And that isn't just about Ofsted asking those questions, because we know Ofsted will, but it's about you knowing that your staff know their children as well. Are staff aware of the stages of children's emotional development and how to deal with that? And each child deals with their emotions in a different way as well. How do you support those transitions? How do you talk to parents to prepare them for transitions? Now, we know, over the past couple of years, it might be you have a general parents information evening and whatever. You might not be doing that now. So again, it might be a video that you release, a bit like what we're doing now. You could record a video for parents to put that onto your website or to your secure Facebook site. And again, it's about that. How does the setting support mutual respect? And again, that's between staff members and parents, staff members and children, and also children and children. So again, you need to think about that. And how do you know parents understand the setting's policies, especially on the important areas? So learning, inclusion, behaviour, child protection. because actually it's great sending it out there, but we all know that once you're in data with a lot of paperwork, you don't always read them. So maybe you think about actually what we'll do is we'll put some key aspects up on a monthly basis. You know, we're focusing on this and whatever. So again, it's just those reflective points to ask yourself some questions within your practice. Hand you over to Alison.
Thanks, Nikki. It takes me a while to get myself off mute. Okay, so we're going into the third key feature now, the curriculum, and we do understand that there, you know, is quite a lot of anxiousness out there amongst our providers in terms of, you know, what is it that we need to get ready for September in terms of our curriculum. And I'll say now before I forget, curriculum needs to come first, followed by how you're going to assess, because the two are absolutely intrinsically linked. So what is it that we want to learn? This is our intent. Okay, so from an Ofsted inspection, you'll hear about the 3 I's: intent, implementation, and impact. So the curriculum is your intent. So Ofsted will be looking, not that we're doing everything for Ofsted, I must stress that, but it is going to be something inspections to come where the curriculum is going to be looked at. Not the paper version, they're going to talk to you about it. The curriculum is a top level plan of everything the early years setting wants the children to learn. Okay, so it's your scaffold. You need to know child development so that you know what you need to teach the children and you know what you need them to learn. So again, going back to what we said before, Nikki's reinforced it, child development is really, really important. Planning to help every child to develop their language is vital. And as we know, communication language is an absolute golden thread that runs through all 7 areas at the earliest foundation stage, and in the reforms really is emphasised greatly. So helping to support children to develop their language is absolutely vital. Campaigns like Hungry Little Minds, that's really good. You can share that with families, helps to encourage parents to engage in activities that supports their children's early language and learning and help them to be set up for school and beyond. So if you're thinking about things to do with families, building on what Nikki's already said, you know, that's something else to do. And obviously how you interact with the children is going to help them to develop their language. The curriculum does need to be ambitious and it needs to be carefully sequenced. Okay, so children learn in small steps. We know that child development is progressive, isn't it? We know that a child starts in a basic way and builds on that knowledge over time. So our curriculum needs to reflect that. It needs to be sequenced. And I've used the example recently with a setting who asked me this particular question about maths. So Nikki's already explained that now the reforms concentrates on really understanding numbers to 10, but that's by the end of reception. So for preschools and nurseries, really we should be focusing on numbers to 5. Okay, so it's not that we're not wanting the children to explore bigger numbers, and if they're ready to, then that's absolutely important. But what we're doing through our curriculum is giving them the building blocks in a really deep way, so that when they get to school to explore those bigger numbers, that comes almost naturally to them. So that's why we've got to almost draw things back, explain it to parents why we're doing that. We're not dumbing down. We're building on the research and all of that evidence out there to tell us that children need those basic skills deeply embedded so that then they will fly and they will flourish. So your curriculum needs to be ambitious, but it needs to have that depth, and I'll come on to that a little bit more in a minute. So young children's learning is often driven by their interests. So plans do need to be flexible. So you need to have that top level plan, that skeleton curriculum, roughly of where children developing normally should be at each step. So that's what your curriculum is going to reflect. But as you go along, obviously, like we know, children learn and develop in different ways and they have lots of different interests, and we need to be able to weave those in as we go along. So your curriculum, your long-term plan reflects that, you know, the goals of the learning that you want the children to take, but minute by minute, week by week, month by month, term by term, you may vary things accordingly to the child's interests and needs at that time. So they do need to be flexible. There needs to be gaps to be able to, you know, change it where necessary. And that leads on to the fact that babies and children do not develop in a fixed way. Their development is more like a spider's web with many, many strands, not a straight line. So that's why, again, we go on to depth in a minute, but that's what, you know, these next steps, we don't need next steps for children because your curriculum is your next steps. already got them there. As a childminder, you may choose to retain them in your brain, but for settings with several practitioners, we really do need to have that skeleton, long, like top level plan written down so that everybody's on board with it and everybody understands it. And those are your next steps. You don't need to record those for every single child. If they're SEND or they've got, any kind of emerging need, you may need to focus more. But for every other child developing normally, their next steps are your curriculum. So forget about next steps. You do not need to record those in the way that we have been to date. Depth in learning. Okay, so we've talked about that deep understanding, that depth is much more important than covering lots of things in a superficial way. So we need to think about learning as being sticky. And if you don't have that base of learning there, then the other learning can't stick to it. It's a funny way of describing it, but visually it helps to understand that depth of learning. So those numbers for babies 0 to 3 maybe, and then for children 3 to 4, they're developing with numbers 4 to 5. They're really getting that deep understanding. And it's not just showing them a number 3, it's allowing them to explore that number in many, many different ways and understanding what 3 is in many different ways. Understanding that 3 could be huge, 3 could be really small, 3 are 3 apples, 3 is 3 people. 1, 2, 3, there are 3. Always remember to reinforce the total, and that really enforces that deep understanding of number, which will help them to fly when they get to school. Okay. So what is the curriculum? Again, we've said about it is the intent, it is the content, it's the what. It's the what we want children to know. So it's not about the activities. It's not about what we're doing as teachers and practitioners. That's the how. So the curriculum is literally the learning that we need them to take to be able to develop normally, as per developmental milestones, etc. So curriculum in early childhood education, ECE, has been framed in many ways, in many different approaches. So, we all heard of Montessori, Steiner, Reggio Emilia, the curiosity approach, and as play-based. And play is obviously intrinsic to the early years foundation stage and remains so, really importantly. So, yeah, absolutely, we need to think, and it's worth kind of going away and looking again at the Montessori approach, the Steiner approach, the Reggio Emilia. We're not telling you to kind of do that as one approach, but many different things brought into your provision can help to support and emphasize it. Reggio Emilia has some brilliant resources. It goes into natural resources. It's having curious objects. It's all of those lovely things that children can explore that don't come at a high cost, which really will support your curriculum. A curriculum also arises from children's choices. Activities and experiences are there, and those will help them to get that knowledge we want them to attain. And it builds on the knowledge they bring from their homes and communities as well. So again, those starting points are really important. Starting points are an assessment, but obviously it will help you to understand that your curriculum is where it needs to be. Practitioners plan intentional adult-led activities. Nikki's already said, the wording has changed in terms of what we need to ensure children have and receive. So having adult interactions is really, really important. We know now through evidence and research that children can't learn just by themselves. They don't learn via osmosis. We need to support them. We need to ask sensitive questions. We need to get in there and parallel play. We need to support them in that way. That pedagogy needs to assist our curriculum so those children can progress alongside. And the curriculum doesn't have to remain the same. You can change it. It's something that does need to be fluid and it needs to develop. And that cohorts change from year to year. So there may need to be tweaks here and there. But again, that top level kind of, skeleton approach can often be consistent. It's those adaptations that you make to it that suits the needs of the children in your cohort. And developing a curriculum which suits settings, individual needs and plans for all is really, really important. And I think it's really important to say, as Nikki said, if things are working for you already, if you really think that you've already got that curriculum in place, the children are making great progress and you're not having to record every single next step, then you might wish to choose to keep what you're already doing. And a one-size curriculum does not fit all. You've got to do what works well for you. And sometimes what you have in place already works well. So there's lots of ways to think about curriculum and planning cycles to go alongside that. We know about the plan, do, review. It's really important for children with SEND. I must stress that at this point, that that's still in place as per area Senko instruction. If they've given you targets for children to work to, that has to stay in place because that's what that individual child needs. And in terms of planning cycles for everything else, you know, that is the same. So you are gathering your key information, you're getting that big picture, you're starting off and you're keeping on going. You need to consider and think. It's interesting they've used the word noticing rather than observing, because I think sometimes we get bogged down with observations having to be written. That's not, you know, it's not the case. You use your practitioner knowledge, you're with the children, you're noticing what they're doing. That is a form of observing. So, you know, please remember that as well. You're linking to your curriculum, you're making sure you're noting in your mind, is that child, you know, able to access the curriculum? Are they progressing in the way that I would expect? And obviously, if they're not, then we need to look deeper into that. Planning will help your children to learn. It absolutely will. We're not saying that everything has to be written down, but to know what resources and activities and the pedagogical things that you're putting into place on any one day, it has to be agreed as your team. Otherwise, it will be chaotic. So you need to have a system to help you to plan, to help those children to learn. And those interactions, that vocabulary and that reasoning comes from the individuals in your settings. So make sure that everybody understands the importance of that. And if there's any training or CPD that's needed, you know, please shout up sooner rather than later. Then you're acting, you're helping children to learn, you're organising the activities and equipment, you're setting up enhancements to your continuous provision, you're setting up lovely provocations to support an interest or a theme. It's all acting to help children to really get that depth of learning and to help them be excited and really curious about what you're offering. And then reviewing. So again, it's all the kind of evaluation that we used to talk about, but reviewing is important so that we know that what we're doing is having an impact, but equally that, you know, we're not wasting our time. It's really, really important that way. And there's lots of other cycles, as is evidenced by this slide. Okay, so we talked about play. Play is an essential part of the early years curriculum. It has to be really embedded. Child-led aspects of your provision is important. You need to plan in enough time for children to own their own play and freely engage and enjoy their play. And sometimes sensitively supported by adults, and obviously it's important for adults to know when to support, or more importantly, when not to support and stand back and observe or notice. Guided towards specific educational outcomes. So they're not just playing at anything, you know, they're choosing to access your provision, but they're playing as they're doing so. But you've got to make the suggestions, you've got to set up the environment so it is enabling, so that all the resources are there to be able to be used in a playful way, and obviously getting your adults to support that. So that quote at the bottom is really pertinent. Play allows children to use their creativity while developing their imagination, dexterity, and physical, cognitive, and emotional strength. Play is important to healthy brain development. It is through play that children at a very early age engage and interact in the world around them. And when you see a child truly engaged with their play, know that their brain is developing, that cognitive development is happening in that moment, and that is such a rare and extraordinary thing to witness, and obviously is why we get into early years in the first place. Okay, and again, yeah, I think that top quote in the blue bubble, children's play in the most effective settings was 2/3 child initiated and 1/3 adult initiated. That's quite important. So again, reviewing what balance you've had in a previous week or term, for example, seeing whether you're roughly on board with that, because the adult interactions absolutely are important, or the adult initiated, but making sure that child initiated is your main driver. Okie dokie. So again, to conclude, and I realise that curriculum is bigger than the slides we have just done. We're giving you an overview in terms of the 7 key features. So yes, you're going to need to explore curriculum more. You're going to need to decide within your teams what your curriculum is going to look like from September. I'd really, really recommend looking at the resources that Nikki's already mentioned on our website. So the toolkit. There are Julian Grenier's Sheringham Nursery 8 curricular goals. That is an example of a way to write down a curriculum or decide on what your curriculum should look like. It is ambitious. It's quite quirky, and when you first look at it, you'll probably think, gosh, what's this? But when you look behind it at the milestones they've put in place, actually it really makes sense, and it's really inclusive from birth all the way through to 4 years old. It's important to note that. So it's not a reception curriculum. It's for a, a nursery, childminder, or a preschool. So do have a look at that. It's really great. So to overview what we've just said, the curriculum is your top level plan. It's knowing child development at the core, which helps you decide what is it you need those children to learn so that they're broadly developing at the right stage and age. And it's everything you want as well as an earlier setting for your children to learn. It's your vision. What is it that you really, really would be embarrassed if they hadn't learned by the time they left you? It's getting together as a staff team and thinking about your key ingredients and what you want the children to learn. That has to be sitting alongside and embedded within child development knowledge as well. The sequence of learning is important, so it needs to be sequenced to support children to build their learning over time. So it's small steps along a journey, making sure that there are opportunities for them to develop in that sequence of learning. So for example, again, those numbers 0 to 5, if you're in preschool, for babies in a baby room, maybe 0 to 2, 0 to 3, all the way through. And then plans do need to be flexible around that. You might choose to ask big questions or introduce themes or things like that. So, based on the children's interests, of course. So your plans need to be flexible enough to make sure that that is embedded. So some reflection points to take away. Has your curriculum been designed by the whole team? If it hasn't, then you're missing a trick, because not everybody in your setting will be as engaged as they should be with this and have the knowledge that they need to. So you do need to do it together as a team, and then everybody's bought into it. Does it include a variety of activities and experiences? Are all the team involved in planning? That's important too. And it doesn't need to be an onerous task. You could choose to look at your continuous provision based on your curriculum, even for a month ahead, to decide the kind of things that you want to put into place for those children to meet those developmental milestones. But at the same time, one week, you think, oh gosh, well, Freddie wants to do dinosaurs, so let's create a little nest outside and bring them in the morning, and suddenly there's a load of dinosaurs that are in this nest that have come out of the ground. That's the kind of enhancements we make that really create curiosity but meet the themes and the interests of the child. Yes, I said about that, all the team involved in that. Do all children have access to all aspects of the curriculum? If they don't act now, are all staff aware that they have flexibility and can change an activity if required? That's giving them your trust as a leader to use their professional knowledge. How can your curriculum build on strengths in the community? How do you provide visits and visitors? How do you use your community to really support the children's rich learning experiences, first-hand rich learning experiences? And how can you help children from different backgrounds to mix confidently with each other, learn about each other's cultures and traditions, respect one another, and grow up to oppose racism and be positive about diversity? Okay, I'll hand you back over to Nikki.
Hi, we're halfway through, and I've just realised the positiveness of actually doing online training, because you can pause at any time you want and have a cup of coffee. So that is a bonus from this now, I've just realised. So we're going to look at pedagogy. We have discussed a lot of this previously, and that's the thing with 7 key features. They interlink. We said that right at the beginning. And some of these statements are self-explanatory. I'm not going to go through them all in depth. We are going to look at this in the area in depth itself. So children are powerful learners. We know that. We know every child can make progress in their learning with that right help. Alison talked about that in curriculum. We talked about it in Best for the Child. But again, we know that all children are different and they learn in different ways and at different rates. And again, when Alison talked about in-depth learning, so again, it might be that you offer that activity the same throughout that week, but you might just change it a little bit to bring another child in. So like the little boy Freddie with his dinosaurs, he might not be interested in that, but you put a dinosaur in it, that brings him along to it. So again, it's having that knowledge, and again, it's supporting staff to gain that knowledge. Effective pedagogy is a mix of different approaches. So children learn through play. We've said it all the way through this, it's very important, by adults modelling, by overseeing each other, and through guided learning and direct teaching. So again, you need to think about how you do that. So again, reflect on that. So again, when you're planning, just thinking, oh, how do we do all of this? Oh, actually, we do that the same way all the time. Actually, maybe we need to think about that. Practitioners carefully organise enable environments for high quality play. And sometimes they make time and space available for children to invent their own play. And again, that is really important so that they can take resources from wherever and they can go and have their own little play that nobody set up for them. They've just followed their own interest. It might have been something they saw on the TV. It might have been something they saw on the way walking into your setting. And again, sometimes staff join in sensitively to support and extend children's learning. So again, you need to think about that. And Alison mentioned having that time to stand back and watch, and we are going to discuss that in a bit later. So children in the early years also learn through group work, when practitioners guide their learning. And again, Alison said quite a bit about that around the curriculum, about that child initiated and adult initiated. And again, research has shown us that children from a disadvantaged area, they learn better with guided learning. It is an advantage to them because actually they might not have that at home for whatever reason. And that isn't always disadvantaged children. We know now that parents are working 2 jobs and that's the life of it, and having time at home. So again, it's, you know, again, knowing your children and knowing their families. Children in the, we talked about that one. Older children need more of this guided learning. We've had that conversation. And a well-planned learning environment indoors and outside is an important aspect of pedagogy. And again, it links into that overarching principle. Children learn and develop well in enabling environments with that teaching and support from adults. So that encompasses all of that. So what is it? So, you know, we've talked about different things. You've got Julia Grenier who quotes, pedagogy is the technical term for all the different ways that practitioners help children to learn and how they teach them, which again links into the Ofsted's definition of teaching. So if you haven't seen that, again, it's we have that on our website. We have a sheet on that, and again, it's worth downloading that because it shows you different ways, or explains different ways of how staff and adults can support. You know, a report published in 2018, Getting It Right, in the EYFS, states that pedagogy refers to educative interactions between practitioners, children and parents. It also includes how teaching and learning are shaped by the learning environment, the learning taught offered within this. So again, it is that environment. We need to make sure that that's, again, key to your reflective practice. And we need to look at everything holistically, everything working together to support the child. And again, that's another one of those reflective questions. So how can you do that? We've talked about creating a rich, stimulating environment. And again, it's got to be indoors and outdoors. So looking at how activities can be offered differently, link into all areas of learning and development. Look at the resources. Are they open-ended? And I know Alison's mentioned in previous training, you know, resources need to be complex, generous, and they need to be a surprise. And you need to also think about it as if you're setting up a room in the morning, and I know for me, if I set up a room thinking, oh, actually, I don't feel very inspired by this, if you're not inspired, the children aren't going to be inspired. So again, think about how you can use your resources in a different way. And also when you're buying resources, think actually, do they have one purpose or do they have many? And again, that's why we talk about Reggio and those points and loose parts and all those different things. So joining in with children's play when appropriate and sensitively, introducing new ideas and challenges. And it's about following their lead. And again, it's one of those things, isn't it? How many of you have actually gone to join children in a home corner and they've all left and you're still sat there? Because what you've done is you've gone into their play, haven't you, without being invited. You've interrupted their play. So again, it's maybe you need to look at that and again, talk to your staff on how you do that. So setting challenges for children, again, in a sensitive way, allowing them to find their own solutions to problems just by asking a question. Giving them a prompt can encourage the process. And again, we link it to the characters effects of teacher learning. You know, if you look at the creating and thinking critically, that is all around language. And it talks to you in the explore bit about questions and suggested questions. So if you've got a member of staff that actually hasn't got that ability, then actually go to that. That is just continual professional development. You're supporting that. You know, oh, sorry, I've got something in my eye there and I'm not sure what it is. And again, showing children how to do things. So it's about modelling and explaining how to do things. You may need to show a lot of times to one child, because actually we know that they learn differently. You know, we do this training when we do it with you, and we look at how we offer the activities in different ways, because we know we have visual learners and auditory learners, and that's no different with children. And some children need to be shown over and over and over again, because that's how their brain works and that's how it's embedded within them. So again, it's having that discussion with your staff, discussing ideas with children, using skillful questioning, challenging their thinking to help them clarify their understanding of ideas. And the one thing about this is about listening and giving them time to answer, giving them time to process their thoughts. You know, and if they cannot explain that, give them time to demonstrate. Don't just pass them by, and we've all done that. You know, give them time. Commenting on what children are doing. So reinforce the learning, feedback, ask questions. Alison mentioned it when you're counting, you know, 1, 2, 3, there are 3. You know, get into that habit of doing that. And again, maybe that's a little 10-minute, you know, staff training, CPD. So again, think about how you can do this. Commenting on what children are doing, we've talked about that. Directly teaching children a new skill, concept, or a piece of information. Again, this links to guiding children's learning. Use resources to introduce things. You know, and again, children love it if they can teach you something. You know, so again, if they know something you don't know, they think that's fantastic. So again, I'm just thinking of ICT with myself. You know, they know how to use the iPads and things, and they can show you things. So again, and directly teaching children a new skill, we talked about, but again, linking to using ICT to support children's learning. Again, there's so many different things out there, and there's so many apps on an iPad. And if you listen to Julian Grenier, he talks about the magnification app. So actually, you're not using necessarily magnifying glasses, you're using your tablet to do that. And then when you're on your tablet, you can then record. You know, they can look up something online. This isn't anything new to yourselves. And again, just a couple of things to support with this. We have on the EYFS Reforms website that's right at the front of this session, we have the inspection handbook on the website, because again, it's got that documentation of what Ofsted will look for and how they will do that. So again, that's a really useful peer-to-peer support tool with your staff. There's also a learning walk on there, which again will support you with your staff. So again, all these things you can use for training. You know, and just like the children, we need to remember that practitioners are unique and we are all skillful in a variety of ways. So again, it's about supporting those practitioners that maybe haven't got that unique skill in one way, and, you know, putting them together. So again, coaching and mentoring each other. So again, supporting staff. We're recapping, as you can see, about that reinforcing that message. It's about, you know, ensuring that child development, they understand child development, you know. And again, the quote up there, the new theories assume that development proceeds in a web of multiple strands with different children following different pathways. We need to be aware of that. Not all children start talking at that certain age. They don't all start walking at that certain age. You know, as I said, there is that spider's web that Alison mentioned earlier on. Awareness of theories. And again, there's the new word or the new theme that's coming out of this EYFS, and especially Development Matters, is scaffolding. And again, the quote there mentions that scaffolding has become a key concept in education. It is a framework to describe an adult supportive role in children's learning. So scaffold enables a child to solve a problem, carry out a task, or achieve a goal which is just beyond his or her abilities. So it's about staff supporting that. And again, this isn't new, you know, and on the next slide, I'll show you how it's not new. But again, it's about awareness of theories. And we're all taught that when we did our training years and years ago. So again, it might be a new prompt, or it might be a 10-minute bite-sized training that you do with your staff. Knowing how and when to support. And we've talked about that very briefly, but this is a skill which may need, you know, and they may need support. You know, again, it's important to remind practitioners, if we offer too much help, child won't learn and they will become dependent on those adults. So again, it's about allowing time, working with their parents. You know, we've all been there when it's been easier to put the child's shoes on, but actually we're not supporting that child and we're not supporting that parent either. So again, it's having that conversation with the parents saying, actually, we're working on this with little Freddie this week, putting his shoes on. Can we suggest, here's what we're doing. Can we suggest you do the same at home? You know, and again, it's also empowering staff to stand back and watching, and Alison mentioned noticing. So again, just step back. If two children are having that little argument over that toy, there is no harm in just stepping them back and letting see if they sort that out themselves. You know, that's called sustained shared thinking. That's about where they're solving a problem between them. They might not solve that problem and you might need to intervene, but again, it's giving them time to do that. Reviewing the environment. So ensuring this is a rich environment, comfortable, safe and attractive and appropriate for the child who use it. You know, we need to remember, you know, that baby's environment will be different from that 3 and 4 year old's environment. So again, and there's lots out there. We've got a environment audit tool on the EYFS reforms. And again, it's worth having a look at that. Again, it's only a starting point. So again, but it might, again, prompt some things with you. Training. You know, Julian Grenier's mentioned through various means the importance of professional development and preparing for the revised changes. You know, now you've got 3 and a bit months to put those changes in place. So I'm hoping by coming listen to this, or if you've been onto any of our other training, you've started that process. You know, but we need to ensure that practitioners have opportunities. Now that could be formal training, it could be informal training. I keep mentioning bite-sized bits of training because actually it goes in a little bit. There's training through your own membership bodies. If you sign up to Morton Michelle, Pacey, EY Alliance, I think Morton Michelle have got 75 trainings that your staff can do. And again, that's helping them. So it's also their continual professional development. Supervision, you know, training should be discussed at supervision, but it also areas within own practice which may need support. So again, they might come to you and say, actually, I'm not happy about this area. I don't understand what I'm doing. Or it might be something you've noticed, or you're not very confident at reading books. How can we support you with that? Actually, there's some, I'm just going to plug Neil Griffiths because he's got a wonderful thing on YouTube on how to tell a story. It's wonderful. So again, it might be that sort of support might be needed. Coaching and mentoring, again, specific person to support, reflect with, and that hasn't always got to be the lead or the manager. It might be that you've got an excellent practitioner, level 3, that will then mentor and coach your apprentice. So again, think about how you can do that. And again, it's about not putting too much workload on one member of staff. And the last one is pause and reflect. And we've talked about reflection all the way through this session. And this should be encouraged with all practitioners all the time. You know, asking themselves, you know, how did that activity go? Did I meet my learning aims? Do I need to change that? Did I introduce new language? So again, get them to think about what they're doing. And again, we've talked about a lot of supporting documentation that's out there. And again, look at our website and there is loads on there. So just to touch on that scaffolding, which is the next slide. So again, we've got Vygotsky and we've got Bruner, and they emphasise the child's environment, especially the social environment. And they both agree that adults should play an active role in assisting the child's learning. So, you know, you have Bruner who mentions a spiral curriculum. You know, this means that practitioners cannot afford to assume that something can be delivered or covered and then forgotten about. So it's that in-depth learning, it's going back on it, it's reinforcing that. You know, and Vygotsky, who argued that teaching should always be aimed at the child's emerging skills, not at the existing ones. And he called the space where the child's skills are emerging in the zone of proximal development. So again, it's that bit where they just need to get there about putting their shoes on. So again, it's that bit that you support. You know, and again, the environment plays a key role in supporting extended children's development learning. And it's not just the physical environment. You need to look at the emotional environment. You know, and you need to think about that. So again, when you go in on a Monday, are you all enthused? Are the staff enthused and whatever? Because actually children pick up on it, and so do parents and so do your staff. So again, you need to think about that feel good factor. So the focus, you know, children are powerful learners. We all know that, you know, but again, it's that passion, that support they get from, you know, the role modeling, the practitioners drive to help children learn. So they role model that. What can we do? How can we do that? Again, asking those questions, offering that enabling environment and that right approach at the right time. So again, I mentioned it previously. Do you use a variety of pedagogical approaches? You know, or are your staff offering the same thing every time? How do practitioners check their choices? Approaches work for the children to help them learn? Do they go away at the end of the activity and think, actually, I had 4 children with me all day, but actually nobody else came to that activity. Did it work? Actually, what do I need to add to that activity? How do I change it? Are staff confident in standing back and encouraging children without interfering? Are staff aware of how children learn? So we talk about the characters of effective teacher learning, but there's schemas out there. And again, 10-minute bite size at your staff meeting. And if you've got a practitioner that's really good at that, maybe you get them to, present that and give them a 10-minute slot. Again, it's about empowering your staff. How do you reflect as a staff team? I'm hoping after this training, that's what you're going to be doing all the time. And any training that you offer, and how do you offer that? And do you give them time? And I'm going to pass you over to Alison.
Thanks, Nikki. Okay, so moving on to 5 out of the 7 key features, and that is assessment. And again, we know that there's a degree of anxiety out there amongst you in the sector, and we understand that. All of you have got processes in place at the moment, but you're being told that you've got to reduce that down. What does that look like? So I hope that the next few slides and what I'm going to be saying will help to reassure you and clarify some things for you. So we've talked about noticing. Observing is still absolutely key, but assessment is about that noticing and observing what children can do and what they know. It's not about lots of data and evidence. So it's using your practitioner knowledge. It's no good taking that away and spending loads of time writing things down. It's about being with the child, noticing what they can do, and then acting on it, either in the moment or through your planning for the next week, or by putting things into place to support that child. It's not to say that we don't write anything down, though. I think that's really, really important to stress that right now. So let's explore that in a bit of detail in the next few slides. So effective assessment, so that we're always looking to be effective and efficient. I think that's a really important word as well to use with the reduced workload agenda. So effective assessment requires practitioners to understand child development. There it is again, so important. It all is key, it interlocks with your curriculum. It's about knowing that a child is doing what they need to be doing at that moment, whether it matches broadly the age and stage of development, but equally when it doesn't, or more importantly, when it doesn't. Practitioners do need to be clear about what they want children to know and be able to do. That's your curriculum, and your assessment then feeds into that. It's setting those developmental milestones according to the curriculum that you set. So your correct curriculum is your next steps, and where you get to an important next step, that might be a curriculum milestone. So when you're accurate about your assessment, that can highlight whether a child has a special educational needs and needs extra help, and that's where more assessment might be required. Because for those children who are making really, really small steps, if you're using the developmental journal, for example, with a child who has special educational needs, that's again, you've got to be able to make sure that you're on top of that and assessing the progress that is actually being made, and importantly, being able to share that with the family. Before you do any kind of assessment of children, it's a good idea to think about whether the assessments will be useful. Okay, really do consider that. Consider what you're doing at the moment. If you're not finding it useful, if it's not highlighting areas of your provision that you need to improve, if it's not telling you anything about that child, then scrap it. I hear a lot of settings talking about highlighting sheets, with the areas of development at the moment from Development Matters, they're just highlighting bits and pieces. Who is that for? What is it doing? If it's helping you, fine, but if it's not, scrap it. Linking on Tapestry, we hear a lot about that. Is that telling you anything? Is that informing your provision and your practice? Is it enabling you to do better? If not, scrap it. Assessment should not take practitioners away from children for long periods of time. No longer do we want to see reams and reams of people with iPads making notes as they're being with children. That's a barrier to being with that child and having that relationship with that child. At the moment that it's important, absolutely note something down that's extraordinary, that's a next step, that's a developmental milestone. But in between that, if you're secure that they're continuing along your curriculum, then that's, from your practitioner knowledge, that's all you need to know. No setting should stop using assessment, however, in ways which works for them. And you'll hear the term, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Julian Grenier uses that all the time. And I really do need to reinforce that right here and right now. If your assessment at the moment is really working, if everyone enjoys using it, if it's working for everybody and is effective in telling you what you need to know about the children, then don't scrap it. Oh, sorry. Okay, so some key points in terms of assessment. So continue with formative assessments. So formative assessments are those snap, wow moments when you see something that is that's really a moment of progress, or not necessarily each individual next step, but an important milestone in that child's learning. I think it is important to note some of that down, just not all. Those things that really tell you something special about that child. Starting points are also really important. So when a child starts with you in your setting, it's really important to get to know them as quickly as possible, using the family to inform that as well, knowing what they do at home, the experiences that they have. I know not everybody can go and do home visits, but clearly we know how beneficial they can be if you can do them. But for large settings, we understand that often can't be done. So use the time to talk to the family, really notice what that child can do in different scenarios. How do they access the resources in your setting? How do they access resources indoors and out? What language do they use? How are they interacting with their peers? How are they interacting with adults? All of those are really important things to note, and a starting point assessment can be an example of a summative assessment that can be effective, but it's up to you to decide that. It can give you opportunities to think about what those children need. And if they're starting with you at a later age, it may be that there are gaps in their knowledge, and those are things that you need to note or notice and be able to put into place for them, so that they make progress quickly. That builds in, as I said, to using your professional judgments. It's not all about writing everything down. It's knowing that that child is broadly on track, and quite a large proportion in many cases of your children will be accessing your curriculum, so they're doing their next steps because that's your curriculum. So therefore that you're in your practitioner professional knowledge, you're safe in your knowledge that those children are developing well. It's those children where you're focusing on that aren't accessing your curriculum for any reason or at risk of falling behind, where you need to assess more in depth. Summative assessments are still important. So it might be worth you looking at the resources called OPAL, which is OPAL. They come from a group of providers called Bayer, BAYE. If you research them, actually Julian Grenier himself advocates the use of the assessment tool OPAL on his blog. So it might be worth having a look at that. But the summative assessments that they suggest you need to do are every 6 months. So you do a deep dive into a child's development every 6 months. You use the characteristics of effective teaching and learning. You might use Leuven scales. You would certainly look at the areas of learning. The prime areas first, depending on the age of the child. Focus on asking the family about anything new that's happening at home and what you have noticed with your professional judgment hat on in the last 6 months, to create a really kind of in-depth deep dive summative assessment on a child every 6 months. That can be used for transition periods, and if you stagger them across the year for each of the children, everybody's going to have that deep dive at a certain point. In between that, your formative assessments, you don't need to do masses of them, like I've explained, only where it really tells you something new and exciting about that child, or more importantly, where you have a concern. Those checkpoints, like I've said, could form a basis for your summative assessment points, so those deep dives. So every 6 months in a child's time with you, perhaps have a checkpoint. If a child is falling behind, you might need to do that more regularly, and certainly on the advice from your area SENCO, make sure that you include that. Using your staff knowledge is really, really important. So it's how to use the assessments to support children's learning and development, and it's not making assumptions, i.e., a child who sits quietly and listening to a story may not be understanding enough to make sense of the book. So using pedagogy approaches to ensure that there's understanding. So ask those open-ended questions. Use puppets, use objects, to really support that storytelling experience. So you're trying to include all of the children so that they can show you what they know about that story. Think about the characters, get the children involved with those, get them to, to retell a story in their own words, or anticipate what's happening next. That'll all help you to understand what that child actually understands about that story. Not taking up too much time, again, this comes back to reducing your workload. And we know from research that, generally practitioners and teachers are overwhelmed with the amount of paperwork they've had to do over the last few years. So we need to make sure that we reduce that to an effective and efficient quantity. So not taking up too much time that it interferes with caring for children. That's what we're here to do. We know that adult interactions with children make a difference, especially to those children from disadvantaged backgrounds. So why on earth would we take ourselves away to write stuff down when we could actually be having that impact in the moment with that child? So why are we doing these assessments? That question is important so that you can ascertain which ones are effective and which ones aren't, and what are we going to do with them? Okay, if there's no purpose to them and it's not telling you anything about the child, again, I would really think strongly about whether those are worthwhile or not. So maybe rethinking your assessments overall is a good conversation to be having as teams or as childminders with other childminders in your area. Absolutely finding out the barriers to learning. So some children may not be making making progress. When you're noticing or observing them with your professional judgment hat on, and assessing them where you need to, it might be that you can see that there are some barriers, and it's really important at that point to find out what those barriers are. So, for example, a more detailed diagnostic assessment might be needed. If it's something to do with speech and language, I would really recommend using ECAT, Every Child a Talker. So that gives you a snapshot and actually could be used regularly. I know lots of settings use those effectively. I would say that as an effective assessment, you keep that going, but that certainly can be done if you are concerned about a child's speech and language. Support may be needed in specific areas, i.e., in number, in counting, work in some more group time for those children if they're falling or if they're not accessing the curriculum in the way that you would expect. So again, like Nikki said, it's revisiting. It's not just doing something once and ticking it off and moving on to the next thing. It's revisiting and giving that depth. The reforms, the changes to the EYFS should give you the time and the brevity to do that. Equality and diversity, we're coming back to this time and time again. We need to ensure that every single child can access our curriculum and has the right information about them at the right time so that we can make informed decisions about what they need. So all staff should be aware of their demographical area. So what proportion of children are, for ethnic minorities, Gypsy and Irish traveller children for particularly have low attainment we're seeing in the data. So it's being mindful of those children and already kind of predetermining the things that we can do to support them. And yeah, look at local and national data as well. It's really important to be aware of what the data in your area is telling you. And although we're not focusing on data, it can be useful when it's provided by us in county, for example, to really consider as a team why that might be, and if there are any aspects in your provision that you could change or adapt to make those outcomes better for children. And down here, it's absolutely true. Formative assessment lies at the heart of providing a supporting and stimulating environment for every child. That formative assessment doesn't always need to be written down, but sometimes it's worthwhile. So let's review on assessment then. So accurate assessment is essential. It still is. I'm not saying don't do any of it. We still need to do some. Clearly for at least for transition points and to know where those gaps are, but also as a nice record for the parents. So not reams and reams and reams of stuff, but things that really tell us something new and exciting about that child can be shared with the family. And we are advocating again the use of personal journeys, scrapbooks, things like that. Tapestry and online resources are effective to a degree, but we want to turn off the linking. We want to take off any of that if it's not useful to you. And I would argue that it probably isn't at the moment, thinking about what we've been focusing on, but use it as a means of sharing things with home. That's absolutely still important. So review what you're doing, keep the things that work well for you, scrap the rest, talk to your teams. What is it they're finding really stressful? That might be an indication of what needs to be scrapped. Choose the right tools for the job. We've got some suggestions on our website for the tools to go with the EYFS reforms, and there's loads of things online. And again, I'd really kind of recommend you look at the Opal resources. They're useful even to start a conversation with your teams. And stop doing work which does nothing to improve children's care and learning. Okay, it's not benefiting them. So why are we doing it? We're all here for the children. No point writing stuff down if it's not helping. And so therefore the reflection points need to be, why are you collecting this data? Why is it? Who's going to find this useful? How do we use the data and information collected? Are you regularly drawing the children's attention to things throughout the day and through ordinary routines? So are you using the opportunity when you're with children to really get to understand what they know in an exciting and obviously sensitive way? Are practitioners confident in their own personal judgments? If not, they might need some support. Are all children noticed? That's a really important one. Making sure that just because a child is getting on with things and not making a fuss at times, that we are still noticing what they're doing. Do you involve the children in their learning and observations? Using those learning journeys is a really lovely opportunity for children actually to put things in there themselves or comment themselves. It's really powerful when a child understands themselves why that's important to put in their own book and wanting to share that. That gives them that real deep understanding of what they're learning. And obviously from a sustained shared thinking point of view, that can give opportunities for those backwards and forwards conversations to do with their own learning. That's so powerful. And do you involve parents in the assessment process? If you don't, I would suggest you should. Okay, I'll hand back over to Nikki.
Sorry. So again, this slide just pulls everything together really. It's an overview. It shows how everything works together. So everything Alison's mentioned with curriculum and assessment and play all around the outside. And again, this is a way to link everything. So it's a really useful tool if you are doing some training, because we mentioned about, the setting should have a curriculum with a vision, and it down the side it says it should be ambitious, broad, balanced, rich, progressive, sequential. So again, those are questions, reflective things. So when you design your curriculum, you can ask yourself, actually, does it do this? If it does half of it, then that's great. You think, well, right, how do we do the other half? So again, we've talked about environment. So again, it plays a huge part in your curriculum, and your space and your resources will allow children to develop their own plays and their ideas. And again, we mentioned that we have an audit. We did a quite a big session on adult interactions, but again, Alison mentioned previously about parents, and it isn't just interactions with children, it is parents and other practitioners, and role model how you interact with each other, because children will learn from this. Assessment, Alison's just mentioned all of that, and again, it's supporting all children, noticing when children are having difficulties and helping them to overcome those barriers. And then planning, using the child's interests and fascinations, using what you know about the child. And again, the next stage of their development, you will know that automatically when you get to know those children. You will know the children that are having problems with scissors and whatever, or actually they're not joining in maybe so much with when you do games, when you do the big games like What's the Time, Mr. Wolf, and they're not comfortable and they're not joining in. You notice those things because you know your children. And I can't stress play enough, because we know we all learn through play, but it's about having those opportunities to have a go. And the reason I put the picture is there is, this could have been Phil Collins at a young age. I'll tell you it's not, but it could have been, and there's his first experience of the drums. And there is a quote which always says there is nothing in a caterpillar which tells you it's going to be a butterfly. And actually, there's nothing saying what that little boy could accomplish, but actually he's having fun. He's learning that there's different sounds through those different pans, So again, it's about those opportunities, but this was just a nice slide to pull it all together for you. So then we're going to look at self-regulation, executive function. And as I said, in the autumn, so please look out for training. We're going to put some training on. We have got some dates. I know we've just got to write the blurb and it'll go up onto the website. If we put up on the website by the well, it won't matter with you with training, but it will be up on the website. So self-regulation and executive function. So this is the 6th key feature. So again, executive function, what does that mean? It means about holding information in their mind. So a child can focus their attention, they can regulate their behaviour, and they plan what to do next. But again, all of that is role modelled to them. You give them the examples or the activities, you know, those memory games that you play to hold information in their mind. They see what happens when you're angry, maybe, because we all do get angry, and how you deal with that. But then those attributes or those abilities contribute to the child's growing ability to self-regulate. So again, it's focusing their thinking, monitoring what they are doing, and adapt that. Regulate those strong feelings that we know that children have. Be patient for what they want. And again, that's a learned apprehension, isn't it? You know, and bounce back when things get difficult. They want to have another go. They want to try. And you've seen those children that have fallen over at the first hurdle. Some will get back up and say, right, I'm going to have a go again. They fall off their bike, or another child's going to say, not doing it. I don't need to learn to ride that bike. I'll keep going back on the one that I was on. And then language development is central to self-regulation. Children may use language to guide their actions and plans. And within that, pretend play gives many opportunities for children to focus their thinking, persist, and plan ahead. So that role play area is really important. And you need to think about that when you're developing your role play areas. So, the executive function of self-regulation. So, you know, the quote is very plain there. These are skills, the mental processes that enable us to plan, focus attention, remember instruction, and juggle multiple tasks successfully. And again, the quote there is, just as an air traffic control system at a busy airport safely manages the arrivals and departures of many aircraft on multiple runways, the brain needs these skills to set to filter distractions, prioritise tasks, set and achieve goals, and control impulses. You know, so again, and what we've put around the side are some things that you might see children doing. I've seen children put their hands over their ears because everything has just got too much for them. It's too noisy. They're not coping, you know, or you have a signboard that they can go and say, look, I feel like this. I feel sad. I feel angry. And again, that one at the top, you know, is about saying to children, it's all right to feel angry. It's not okay to hit or hurt somebody, but it is okay to be angry. And we all feel angry at times. And again, we need to learn those skills to set those children up for life. And we know that we've come into this pandemic and we're coming out of this pandemic and we're seeing more mental health issues, especially in teenagers, and we know it's impacting on our primary age. So again, right at that beginning, you are putting those foundations in there. You know, you are supporting those children with strategies. So, executive function, you know, and again, is a fancy term to describe some developmental skills that you've already pretty familiar with. So, you know, Sue Asquith, who is an early childhood consultant and author, you know, she put it very simply, executive function helps us to get things done. It's a group of tasks, skills we use to execute a task. So we stay focused, keep us organised, you know, and over the years, we use different names, you know, problem solving, playing with an idea. We think before reacting, we stay focused, but actually it refers to 3 core components. So working memory, how we hold on to bits of information. And again, we all do that differently. Some of us have to reinforce that by writing things down. Some things just, it goes in and it stays in. So again, we need to think about children, how they do that. Mental flexibility, how can we change that, what we're focused on, as our situational needs change? And again, some of us handle change differently. Some of us are very proactive and we can get on with it. Some people actually like it where we are and actually they don't want to change. So there's a resistance there. So again, it's how you support those children. And self-control, how can we resist impulses and set goals for ourselves? So again, it's supporting them, and through the characters of effective teacher learning, that will help us support them do that. You know, and you know, the point for us is it's easy for us grown-ups to take our task management, you know, making a sandwich is very simple with us, we just do it, we don't think about it. But for a child, you've got to break it down. You've got to find the bread in the first instance. You've then got to think, oh, actually, where's the spread? Where's this? Where's that? I need the utensils. I need the plate. We do it automatically. But for a child, they have to break it down. So again, going back to a bit like scaffolding, you have to break those tasks down. That's how we support, you know, working memory. We do those games to support that. We break those games down. So, and self-regulation. So while executive function is important, you really only get a full picture when you look at self-regulation too. So it's Dr. Mime Concubaire. So she says the two terms are extremely linked, but self-regulation is even more fundamental for children. If executive function helps us to get things done, self-regulation helps us to understand our emotions. And we know that children do not readily control their emotions by default. Again, it's a learned skill, you know, and as adults, we don't always have that. We can get up angry and show our emotions very, very easily, you know, and as children, they have to learn that through co-regulating their emotions in coordination with a caring and guiding adult. So that pedagogical approach, adults need to model self-regulation by talking about feelings like anger, frustration, or sadness, and how we can process that. This is absolutely vital to our happiness and well-being. And we need that in a place before we can get to executive function. And again, the reason I put the picture there is because actually that is pretend play. So children have that chance to explore their emotions with other people. They see things on TV, they react it. So actually that is letting them explore that feeling. And again, there's other activities like peekaboo. So when it comes to memory, so executive function, song and dance, again, that's hitting that memory. Imaginary play, and again, that supports rules, because actually children are very good about rules if they design them themselves. You know, so that if you have a rule making session or when they're playing, they will say to a child that you don't do that. That doesn't happen in this game. They're very good at control of that when they help design them. And a matching and sorting game. So again, all of those things. We have a video on the next slide, and it's about flipping your lid, and by Dan Siegel. This is just before we play it, the first link on there is to this video. The second link is to Dr. Dan Siegel explaining that, and then the third one is Keep Your Cool Toolbox. Thanks, Alison. Again, it might be worth talking about that through your staff when you do a quick 10-minute thing, because actually we've all been there. We've all flipped our lid at some time or another, especially through the pandemic. I think we have done that. So self-regulation, what do we need to consider? We need to look at nature and nurture. And that child that was covering his ears previous slide, you know, that child lives in a chaotic and noisy home with loud television on most of the time. You know, if children in this type of home environment are likely to have high levels of emotional dysregulation, they are also likely to have lower levels of independence. So it goes back to knowing your child and your family. You know, we know that as the brain and nervous system develop, children need that positive experiences of care, communication and play. And these experiences support their growing ability to self-regulate. And again, it's about offering strategies. So emotional and cognitive self-regulation, you know, it's managing your feelings. We discussed that on the previous slide. Cognitive self-regulation, when children increasingly manage to screen out distractions and keep on the task at hand. So children with weaker self-regulation will struggle with play, learning and friendships. They may struggle with demands of schooling as they grow older. So again, you'll notice a child that flips from one to another. And when they're younger, they're going to do that. But you'll know as a child gets older, again with child development, you know what age roughly they should be able to sit there and concentrate for a limited number of time. Now, we're not saying they're going to sit there for 20 minutes. No child's going to sit there for 20 minutes. So again, it's about being realistic in your approaches. So positive approaches. So co-regulation, self-regulation, it develops over time. We know that. We know it's hard for a small child to manage their feelings, control their desires, you know, to have what they want straight away. So again, it's about how we support that. So going back to pedagogy, how do you support that in your setting when a child wants that immediately and they can't have it? You know, importance of physical development. So again, we all know that areas of development connect. So we need to be aware of that. And again, you know, children hit out for a reason, because again, they might not have the language development. They might have seen that actually at home, that's how they get things. If I hit out at something, they'll give it to me. So again, it's having those discussions between parents, helping children become independent learners. Now, we know if you've got a very organised setting and children can access everything, that's good. They're independent in your setting, and that's brilliant. Independent learners are a little bit different. They require different types of sensitive adult interact and support. We want them to be involved in their learning. So like Alison said when she mentioned the learning journals, we want them to be involved in their learning. We want them to come forward and say, I did this because, or I didn't give up, I carried on and look what I've made. So again, we need to think about that. It's about persevering, keep trying. Again, characteristics of effective teaching and learning. Language and development. You know, is one of the objectives of the revised EYFS to put more emphasis on child's communication. You know, it's the last point under self-regulation and executive function. And this is why it's so important to notice children who are not developing their pretend play, not using language in their play. You know, that's when they need practitioners to step in and sensitively to help them. So again, going back to that, and we talk about role play because that's a big area of thing. When you're doing your role play, maybe you have a home role play in your setting, maybe indoors, and you keep that. You might add different things to it, but then if a child comes in and say they've been to the vet, so they want another role play, maybe you put that in a different area if you've got space, or you take it outside. Because actually that might only last for a couple of days, but your role play area with different resources and different bits and pieces in will sustain that children's learning. And, you know, sustained shared thinking, talked about it very briefly earlier, is an episode in which two or more individuals work together. So it's an intellectual way to solve a problem, you know, clarify a concept, evaluate activities. Both parties have to contribute to that. And again, that can be an adult and a child, it could be two children. You know, and those two quotes there link. What the bottom one links to the importance of physical development, and the top one again, Alison mentioned about the Education Endowment Foundation. They have an early years toolkit, which is really worth going to have a look at. We've got this link on our sources of information. So again, there's lots of support and resources out there for you to think about. So the focus of this, and again, the main focus is to support children's lifelong mental health and well-being. So again, all of those things we've talked about, emotional and cognitive self-regulation, helping children to become independent learners. If they become independent learners, they will become independent young adults and they will become independent adults. And again, language is at the heart of learning. So again, it's having those discussions. You know, are children given the opportunity to make their own choices and decisions? Are children given time to work with children, develop their own ideas? Do you offer the strategy of support from another child rather than adult? You know, but be aware, don't put too much on the other child because they can get angry the same because actually you're interrupting their play. But again, go and ask that child, actually, I've got little Fred over here. He's not building a tower very well. And I've noticed that you build towers great. You know, do you have time to go and offer support? So again, it's giving them the onus, isn't it? Giving them the choice to make a decision. When children are in dispute, do practitioners give them time and space to resolve the issue by themselves? What strategies do you offer children to help with their emotions? Do you offer both open-ended child-initiated tasks and adult? So again, some of these now are becoming key themes to our reflective questions. And do you consider the child's home life when working with children's child self-regulation? You need to think about that. Hand you over to Alison for the last one.
Okay, so last but not least, I think is really important to say, partnership with parents. And we all know it's been, you know, part of the EYFS for a long, long time. And I know you will work really, really hard in sometimes challenging circumstances with, you know, really kind of getting those relationships working with your parents. And it is absolutely important for them to have a strong and respectful partnership with yourselves, with the settings that they use. And this sets the scene for children to thrive in the early years. We all know that. So we've got to listen carefully and listen regularly to parents and give parents clear information about children's progress. So going back to assessment, you know, we're not doing masses of next steps or observations, but in your daily kind of handovers with parents, you could be saying something about what they have learned today or the progress they've been making. But at times, and especially when you do those deep dives potentially, they might be the opportunities that you use to share learning with parents. So you don't need to do it massively regularly, but regularly enough to show that that child is progressing along the normal kind of developmental journey. The help that parents give their children at home has a very, very significant impact on their learning. So again, we've talked at length, haven't we, about understanding what that looks like for a child in your setting, and that will vary from child to child. So supporting parents as much as we can, and I know there are limits to that, but as much as we can to support them with the home learning environments. Yeah, and obviously if you have concerns of any description in terms of that, you know, from an early help perspective, that's something to consider as well. You know, we can support you with that, and the early help assessment might be able to support the parent and the family to make changes where necessary as well. And that leads on nicely to some children get, you know, much less support from their learning at home than others. So by knowing and understanding all the children and their families, you know, you can offer the extra help to those who need it most. You can do some of it, okay? So when they're in setting with you, you will do your absolute best for them, and that child will benefit from that. And if we need to do something to support from home, talk to the parents first. And as I said, if it needs additional support from early help services, then that's you know, also important to think about at the time when it's necessary. It's important to encourage all parents to chat, play, and read with their children. So any advice and support you can give them, any top tips, any resources you can send home, any things that you do in your setting. I know a lot of settings have a soft toy or a mascot that they use, and children can take them on trips or just take them home for the evening and overnight, and talk with their families about the fact that mascot has come from your setting, and coming back and talking to others about it the next day. That can be really powerful and really involve parents in a very simple way. So using things like that, all about me boxes, you know, for some children who you want to engage more with families, perhaps they bring some special items in a box from home, you can discuss it and send things back. So it starts that dialogue in a really kind of supportive and you know, safe way that doesn't involve, for what some parents will find difficult, coming in and actually having a conversation with you. So lots of different strategies that you can use, and we're happy to support. If anyone's got any different questions about any of this, please do email through to us. We can support you. So we know this quote. Okay, so this comes right the way back from 2007. Parents are children's first and most enduring educators. That is absolutely true. When parents and practitioners work together in earlier settings, the results have a positive impact on children's development and learning. And we see that, don't we? Those families who are really engaged with their children's learning tend to make, not always, but tend to make better progress. So the more that we can engage with those more reluctant parents, the better it will be for those children's outcomes. Working in partnership with parents is central to the early years foundation stage, and it stays that way. That is absolutely still essential. So consulting them about children's early experiences helps practitioners plan for effective learning at the setting and helps them support parents in continuing their children's learning development at home. So remember at the back of your mind, what you are doing is helping that child. And if there are gaps at home and support that's needed, do what you can to support the family to put even small changes into place at home, like a bedtime routine, including a story. Really, really powerful. If that's the most that they can do, that's something. So yeah, again, there can be some barriers. We've kind of touched upon it already. You know, we know that there's been, especially this last year, families have had it really, really tough. There could be personal or family issues going on. Time and energy could be really lacking for a variety of reasons. Money, unfortunately, still comes into it, and children's experiences, you know, can be effective if you know there is poverty related or the you know the household income is really low. Often knowledge emotions and confidence as well from the parents is really difficult. They may have had a bad experience themselves. You know, institutions in the past might represent something really, really, frightening to them, or just something that makes them really anxious. So understanding where those barriers might be so that we can be more sensitive in our approaches to them is really important as well. So they might present in a certain way, but again, it's like children, isn't it? You know, behavior is communication. We need to know what sits behind that so that we know the best way to support them and therefore their children. Sometimes perceptions of responsibility can differ. We know that. So parents thinking it's the nursery's or school's job to do it all, to provide education and learning activities and make sure their children learn. So helping them to understand actually that the little things they do with their child at home is having a massive impact as well is really, really important. So things like sharing books and resources, talking to them about the benefit of doing activities at home, getting away from their screens and their devices. When they're pushing the pram or the pushchair, talking to their child rather than looking at a screen or a device, going out on family walks, noticing things in the environment, just little things that don't cost any money can make a massive, massive difference to that child's learning development and their future life chances. And that quote there from World Health Organization is really pertinent here. Responsive caregiving is what matters the most. Being aware of your child's needs and being able to respond warmly. It is about being loving and also providing sensible, secure routines with clear behavior boundaries. And we know increasingly a lot of families struggle with that. So again, giving hints and tips, telling them what you're doing that's working well in setting, what you're trying in setting, can help them at home. And, there's no book for parenting, is there? We all say that as parents ourselves, we wish there was a book. There isn't one. So some people will struggle more. So any support you can give, don't underestimate how much that probably is appreciated by the parents. So to conclude on this, we know that you already do loads and loads of work, so it's just really a recap for you, and again, something for you to reflect on with your teams, whether you're doing all that you can and it's still working, and if there are gaps, potentially to think of different ways. But to work with parents to support children's learning and development, that's what we're talking about here. So the home learning environment is really key, and sharing key information with parents at the right time is also very important, so they understand how their children are progressing, and really importantly, where you are worried or concerned about a potential or risk of delay. So reflection points to take away. So look at how you are communicating with parents. Is it still working? Is it still relevant? Are there any gaps? Do you communicate with all parents? Again, those gaps that we're talking about. So if there are gaps, how can we plug them? How do parents share their views? Some settings have a yearly questionnaire that they give out. Again, just be cautious though, because children with EAL, the parents might not be able to access that. So think about doing it in ways that supports the cohort of your children, but also the cohort of your parents as well. How do you share information with parents? How do you support the home learning environment? If you don't, perhaps it's just, some of the resources that are already out there, sometimes it's just about signposting, giving some hints and tips about where to look for these things, or having some hard copies that you can hand out. And if you need help and support with English as an additional language, if you're worried about parents not being able to access it because of a language barrier, the Early Years Alliance, we have commissioned to support settings to put these things into place and to support you. And we have translation and interpretation services as well that we have commissioned. So please do get in touch if you'd like to know more. And how can you support parents to develop their home learning environment? Yeah, there's some straightforward ways. It doesn't mean to say that you have to do courses or training on it. It could just be, as I said, signposting.
So we've talked about this all the way through. We've talked about training, we've looked at reflective practice and questions which support this, and they all mention practitioners training. So, we know that some practitioners are intuitive and things come naturally, some may need support. We need to remember that everyone is different and we all learn differently. So we need to make sure the correct support is offered. So training has many elements as detailed in the picture, isn't it? Skills, it's the knowledge, it's the competence, it's productivity, capacity, all those things link into that. So through observation and supervision, you can support your staff, but it has to be an honest two-way conversation. Remember, we need to support staff wellbeing in this. So if they're already feeling low and you go in saying, well, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you're just going to end up making more problems for yourself. So it's about looking at that. So, You know, it's, you talk to your staff about staff role modelling, and that isn't just to children, but it's also to other staff. So again, talk about that. You know, staff showing good practice within the setting. It might be that you need a staff member needs support with that. You know, it might be that you have a staff member that just sits there and just works with everybody, but she doesn't take the initiative, or he doesn't take the initiative. You know, with children, with tasks, you get those members of staff. If one member says, I'm just going to go and do this, well, I'll cover you doing that. So again, they might just need that support on how to do that. You know, how to be supportive to children, other practitioners, parents and carers. They might not have the confidence. They don't think they're strong enough. They're not sure what to say. So again, they might need support with that. Willing to train. And again, that's something you need to be expecting your staff to do. If they go off on training, to take that training back and bring that into a staff meeting. So if somebody's been on, say, one of our maths training, you say to them, like, actually, will you come back and give a 10-minute bit about the maths training and things that we could incorporate within our own session. And again, empower them to do that. Being flexible. So again, letting them know when an activity is not working and adapting or changing that, or changing the routine to support a specific event. Again, are staff confident in doing that? And how can you support them? And again, support through coaching and mentoring. It might be they need further training. You know, and again, we can offer this through a variety of means. I've talked about 10-minute bite-sized training that you give at maybe a staff meeting. It might be that somebody's not very well up on emotions, so you send them off to the emotion coaching training. We have a list of training out there that we offer. We put a training planner out. We're busily doing our autumn one now and our spring one. As soon as they are ready, they will be on the Support Services for Education web link, and you go on there. At the moment, you are being very lucky. We are fully funding these trainings at the moment. There might come a time when we need to start charging, but we know that we want to support you, especially through the revised EYFS changes. And we know that you've been through pandemic, so we know that maybe sustainability is a bit of an issue. Those are on the support services are the trainings that we're offering. If there is anything specific you need, then please come to us or talk to your early years communities. They have money to put on training as well. So again, we're quite happy to do bespoke training, but I will tell you now there's a little bit of a charge for that. But again, come to us, because it might be that we might not do that, but we can signpost you to somebody that does. So please don't hesitate. And we've got our team inbox on the back page. We've talked about this. I'm not going to go through this bit by bit. And again, we have put the link at the bottom of this page as well. So again, those are all the sorts of things that we have on our website, or if we haven't got them on our website, we put links to them. And again, as I said, the Education Endowment Foundation, please go on there, especially look at their toolkit. And also when we talk about progression documents, the National Centre for Excellence in the Teaching of Mathematics have got some really good ones on there that you can then adapt to yours. But again, like Alison said, we've got Julian Grenier's 8 curricular goals on ours, so you could link the two together. So download maybe Julian Grenier's, download those and think, actually, how can I meet those? How can I put them together? So there is a lot out there, but again, if you need support, contact your area link workers. And we always like to leave you with something. So we've got a nice little quote there. No child is unsmart. Every child's a genius at something. It is our job is to find it and then encourage it. And we know that you do that. And again, going back to my Phil Collins and my earlier one here, if you're as old as I am, you'll know a Percy Thrower, or you know a oh, I can't think what his other name is now. It's just gone out of my head. Who's the gardener that's very active now?
Alan Titchmarsh. Oh, yeah.
Oh, Alan Titchmarsh, yes, or Monty Dom, I was thinking. You know, and the other one there, it could be a famous artist, or it could just be a holiday. We all need one of those. A hobby to support mental awareness. And people are looking at that thinking, oh my God, he's got a hot glue gun there, he'll hurt himself. Actually, you can get cold glue guns now. So again, it's another way of bringing technology into your setting. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you take things away when you do it with your staff team, or, you know, even if you just watch it yourself. But again, thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Any questions, as Nikki said, please do contact us.
I think really there's another slide, I think, with our, is there another slide on this one?
Oh yeah,
so again, you can contact your link workers, or you can go through to the SSE early years team and it'll come through to the relevant person. But Again, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.